Thanks a lot. Good morning. I thought, with apologies to David Letterman, I'd start with my top 10 list for ways you can calculate that a book is too risky to publish. Number 10, you just got a new job and you're buying it to make a statement. Number 9, it's being sold by an agent you want to impress. Number 8, the book's proposal was written by people other than the person who will actually write the book. Number 7, the book is by a celebrity you can't meet before you acquire it. Number 6, the book is by a celebrity you can't meet even after you acquire it. Number 5, the author's previous book failed because the previous publisher screwed up. Number 4, the book is a tie-in to a television series or movie that is on the verge of being sold. Number 3, everyone else at Frankfurt is trying to buy it. Number 2, it'll be a crash, but we need it to make our year. And the number 1 reason, we don't know what the book is yet, but the author has 12,000 friends on Facebook. All right. Well, in my 30 years of book publishing, I've certainly experienced the full range of risk. Starting out at St. Martin's Press in 1978, where the philosophy was a lot of small risks. That was the philosophy at the time, and started out with doing tons of British imports at very low cost, and one of which famously was originally called A Cow in the Waiting Room, and that became All Creatures Great and Small. So sometimes a little risk can pay off, especially if you give it a better title. But the philosophy there was to take all of these small bets, and Tom McCormick once wrote an article for Publishers Weekly where he used vats and buckets as the way to talk about profitability. And the idea was if you had a fixed cost of a publishing company, the more, and that was the shape of that was a bucket or a vat. I don't remember which was which. But anyway, you get the idea. It is an X size hole, and you keep pouring revenue into that hole. What spills over the top into the vat, or the bucket, whichever it was, is your profit. So the more little bets, the better. Lots of little risks. And that was the foundation of that company. And that legacy is there in many ways today. Then I moved from St. Martin's to what was then Warner Books, now Hachette, where the philosophy was the opposite of the risk continuum. A few really big bets, where you bet the farm on every book. The first book I acquired there, the advance was more than the 300 books I had acquired at St. Martin's Press combined. It was The Discovery of the Titanic by Bob Ballard, and luckily it did better than the Titanic itself had done, and was very successful and made its money back. But it's pretty scary. When a book did well, it did really well, and when it didn't, it was like hitting a big iceberg. Now, Hachette has gone on to make great success with that philosophy, so that can work. When we started Hyperion in 1990 at Disney, it was, we were in all the strat plans at Disney. We were the toe in the water strategy. So I kept thinking of myself as a toe, like a corporate toe, and my goal was to maybe become a foot over time. And after 17 years, I think we got up to maybe being a foot, an ankle, but the idea was, let's try this business out. And so it was a few small bets, which is, it's hard to get traction with a few small bets, but we were lucky with a book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff early on, which we started with 35,000 copies, and it ended up selling 9 million. And that gave us a chance to do 26 sequels until we drove the poor brand into the ground. But the beauty of having a few small risks, a few books, and of course John Karp doing 12 or other lists with focus on a few titles, is that when Don't Sweat the Small Stuff started working a little bit, it became our obsession. Because we didn't have a million other things distracting us. We could go where the smoke was and make it into a bonfire. We just kept building that book and kept building it, and that's how we got to 9 million copies. That emboldened us, and we wanted to grow because we were part of a corporation and we had a strat plan to fulfill. So we started making bigger bets and bigger bets over the 17 years I was there, and we had enough successes, luckily, to make up for the failures. Oprah Winfrey's Make the Connection sold 2.5 million copies. Mitch Albom's The 5 People You Meet in Heaven sold 6 million. Just before I left, Randy Pausch's The Last Lecture was up to 4 million copies, and that book had cost almost $7 million to acquire. But it was getting kind of scary. I watched this cycle of needing to come up with bigger books to make up for the unearned advances and returns of the previous ones that had been disappointments. And I started really worrying about the fundamentals of the business. There was a cartoon in The New Yorker about 6 months ago that showed a group of lemmings going along a cliff. And they get to the edge of the cliff, and they magically go up. And the caption is, "What Lemmings Believe." And that, I think of that cartoon a lot when I think about trade publishing. And in a way, we need to have that kind of romantic optimism to be able to keep making new bets on new material. Or we just can't go on if we just remember the past and look at the odds. But we are under certain pressures that we need to take a real grips of, and that was what generated the creation of HarperStudio 2 years ago. The trends that I was seeing were clear to all of us, which were unearned. The advances were spiraling out of control. So I wanted to try to restrict. Let's see what we can do if we limit ourselves to 5-figure advances, which to many small presses and university presses is a lot of money still. We had a $100,000 maximum, but compared to the trade publishing millions, it's going on a diet. So $100,000 maximum in exchange for a 50-50 profit share with the authors. And that was one of the elements of the experiment. When I started that, Nigel Newton of Bloomsbury, whom you may know, said, "Bob, the good news is you're the leading edge. The bad news is you're leading with a negative." And that was the challenge. To acquire books, we weren't buying books at auction. We were creating a lot of what we published, or going to people proactively, suggesting ideas. We had to make our own material. But we did sign up 70 books there, which will continue to be published there. And we published about 16 of them while I was there. Crush It! On Your Table is one of our bestsellers. We had 3 New York Times bestsellers, and the nice thing about making that size bet, of course, is that the ones that were disappointing, we didn't lose much money on, if at all. And so the ones that worked, and most of them did work pretty well, we got to keep the profits from. But that's the difficulty is that, as Nigel predicted, we're competing against publishers who are still willing to overpay. So it takes an incredibly aggressive work to create those books and approach those authors and convince them to come for less. But it's a worthy effort. The second thing we tried to do was go non-returnable, which was another kind of challenge altogether. When this was announced, I heard from the people running every top account in the United States saying, "This is fantastic. We hate returns too." The amount of time and money we spend processing returns is an unbelievable waste. 40% average returns. I mean, if you came from another planet and looked at this business, you'd think, this just can't work. Financially and environmentally disastrous. But then when we went back to these accounts with terms, it was, well, gee, we don't want any inventory risk. Like, well, so we spent a lot of time trying to come up with terms that were attractive and get accounts on board. And we did get a number of major accounts on board as non-returnable accounts in the United States. But by the end of the 2 years, frankly, it became a reason not to buy speculative material. It was too often used as the reason not to take a position. And ultimately, we let go of the non-returnable approach just in the interest of distributing books we believed in as publishers. So I haven't figured that one out. I leave it to you, supply chain experts out there, to do it. And clearly, just in time and data is going to be more of what the solution's about than just non-returnable, returnable. We have to get a lot more sophisticated in a hurry. But I will gladly buy a drink for anybody who has the solution to that problem. I spent 2 years trying to solve it and haven't yet. The other thing we focused on was marketing. Having seen with BookScan giving us data that paid advertising did not move the needle, just didn't for us, at Hyperion at least. So for paid print, television, radio, we didn't see an effect. We could see a measurable effect from publicity. We could see measurable effects from online marketing. We did not see effects from paid advertising. So at HarperStudio, we just said it from the beginning, and this was helpful because if you do it for one author, it's hard to not do it for another. we're just not going to do paid advertising. We're going to focus a lot of effort and plenty of money on publicity and online marketing instead, where we think we might have an effect, and have a little bit more real-time way to measure that effect. And that was effective. We had a lot of experiments at HarperStudio that worked, whether it was traditional publicity working or the kind of things we did with Gary Vaynerchuk, many of which were his doing. If you go to his Crush It book website, you will see the kind of innovations he did that we benefited from as his publisher, where he offered bulk ordering of various quantities. If you order 25, you get a wristband. If you do order 50, I'll call you up and consult with you. Order 100, I'll come to your house and wash your car. I mean, it was just, you'll see that he has these offers that drove people to online ordering to an incredible degree. This is happening in the music business, of course, which is worth looking at because they have a lot of the problems that we don't have yet. And a lot of bands, I'm sure you've seen, are doing things where they bundle formats on their sites for direct selling. They'll tell you the download for X price, download plus the CD mailed to you later for Y price, download plus CD plus vinyl, download plus CD plus vinyl plus t-shirt, until the drummer of the Nine Inch Nails was actually offering, I think it was $1,000, he would come and wash your car. And that is something I wanted to try at HarperStudio that we weren't able to because we don't really have the ability that we found yet in our industry to combine digital and physical shopping carts. I don't see retailers doing this yet, and I'd like to, because I think that while, yes, we've set up this dichotomy between physical and digital, there may be a lot of ways we can play with combining the two for customers. What if you could buy the physical book, and because once as publishers we've sold the book, whatever platform it is, we've gotten our $25. I'm happy to give you the digital formats, the audio, the ebook, or maybe give you something a little different that's an update, or it's somehow bundling these things so that it's an enticement to make that purchase. Whether you start with the ebook and then you get something physical, or you start with a physical book and then you get the previous book or the ebook or the audiobook. I'd love to see us being able as an industry to mix and match so that we're not forcing customers to just choose between the two completely every time. But we weren't able to try that yet because the industry wasn't quite there in combining those formats yet. The last resource I think we don't risk enough of, I wanted to talk about, was time. Because the whole difference between sell-in and sell-through in our business, where we're selling in books we haven't read yet, in fact they haven't been written yet, they have a lot of friends on Facebook. John Karp at 12 calls this kabuki, where we spend a lot of time in our business creating this theater for each other of titles and covers and plans and bullet points and slideshows and for books that we haven't read yet. And that's become normal. But if you think about it, gee, that's pretty risky. First of all, you haven't given the book possibly the time it needs to be a good book. You very likely haven't put the right cover or right title or right copy on it, because the book it's an organic process where it's changed direction in the course of this process. And worst of all, you haven't had a chance to really find out where your passion lies. I mean, out of the various books you're publishing, you haven't had a chance to really read that book, say, oh, wow, they really did it. It's right now. And be excited about the book because you know that it's really done it right and you've gotten all the elements aligned. The ability to be passionate about what you're publishing has been lost in many cases. So when you don't have that, except for the occasional make book or pet project, then that's maybe the riskiest thing of all, to be an automatic pilot. And it's hard to take that time because we're all under pressures to deliver budgets and deliver fiscal years. The company I'm joining next month at Workman, a lot of the reason I've always wanted to work there and that I'm excited about it is that Peter Workman, since 1968, has been doing exactly that. I once had lunch with him and complimented him on an ad he had in PW for a book called Younger Next Year. And I said, oh, this great ad. He said, oh, did you like that ad? I'm glad, because we were going to do that a year ago, but it wasn't quite right. I thought, wow, what an amount of patience. But he is famous for taking the time to get a book right, no matter how long it takes. And then once it's published, it's not over 2 weeks later after it got the media or not. Years later, it is new every day. And so those books on that list are up to 7 figures that started at 20,000 regularly, because every book is new to that team every day. So, and he publishes with passion. So I'm interested in learning how that's done, how you keep a lid on advances, how you publish just in time, how you market smart, and how you publish with passion by taking enough time to get it right. So that's my next adventure. And speaking of time, I'm probably getting close to it. So I did want to leave time for questions. I'm not sure what you might be interested in out of all I've just blabbered on about. Anyone? Come on, there must be something. Have more coffee. Let's figure this out. Let's figure out the whole business today. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of great online marketing happening at Workman. There's a lot of, the books are sold as ebooks. Interestingly, though, to your point, a lot of the Workman list is illustrated books with unique packaging, and so far that's not a format that is on the one hand, it hasn't been endangered by the ebooks. On the other hand, it's been difficult formats to translate into ebooks. So the Algonquin fiction and some of the other books there are certainly available on ebooks now, as ebooks now, and will continue to be. But I'm interested in seeing what, as we get into the ability with the iPad and other technology to do multimedia, the books that were not yet at Workman translated as easily into ebooks because of the kind of formats they may actually be terrific in using this new technology. So I think that'll be fun to investigate. Yeah, we'd spent a lot of time, actually not after we abandoned it, but before we started, we talked to booksellers about every possible permutation of shared markdown or all these different approaches, and it was really tough, actually. We really had a hard time coming up with something that was satisfying to everyone. So I remain interested in ways to do that, because the idea that a book is distributed simply because of the plans that are in place of what you might pay to support its placement, and then it just comes back without the burden being on the bookseller to figure out how to merchandise it. There's something that that's uncomfortable for me about that I still wish I could figure out a solution for booksellers too, but I haven't yet. So I look to you for your suggestions. First of all, it was hard to convince authors to go with the profit-sharing model because most people want the bird in hand with a larger advance up front. But the authors we were able to get were authors who did not need the money to write the book over time and were doing something that did not require as big an investment. So for instance, for Tom Peters, who hadn't done a book since 2003, we had seen that on his blog he was doing these wonderful success tips and giving them away for free. So we went to him and said, this could be a book. And that resulted him in The Little Big Things, which was just published. A lot of it was found material in that way. Our first book was 24 previously unpublished pieces by Mark Twain. Twain didn't need the advance, and there they are, these pieces that had never been published. Wow, published Mark Twain. So convincing the estate. Magazines worked with Rolling Stone, with the Oprah magazine, with a quote book that's just coming out. They didn't really focus on advances the same way as the traditional trade author. So we would approach people with anthology ideas. Harold Bloom's upcoming anthology of poetry, we went to him with the idea that he liked. So these are things that didn't require 3 years of needing the advance to live on as much. Or we did multi-book commitments. With Emeril Lagasse's cookbooks, we did a 10-book commitment, which if you were paying more per book, that would be harder to make. But we were profitable with each one, even at that long-term commitment. The second part of your question is, did it mean that the authors were more involved in the decisions? Absolutely yes. I mean, that was part of what interested them. And it actually interested me as well, because I was tired of the setup where for an author, it makes sense for every morning to wake up and say, hey, how about a full-page ad? Hey, how about a party? It's like, well, because there's nothing to lose. Eventually you might say yes to something. But it was nice to be able to say, well, do you really want that too? Because here's what the impact would be, and here's what it would cost. Let's do it if we agree, but let's not if it really doesn't make sense. And it made the process much more collaborative. I did not see a problem with being completely transparent with authors about the full P&L and all the costs of what they were interested in. And if they knew what we knew, I had faith, even though we were putting the money at risk initially, that they would see what really was effective or not and want to choose those methods over the ones that weren't. And I found that to be true. They really appreciated being treated as part of the process, and they made better decisions. It was much less adversarial. So that I found interesting. I thought that was useful. They're paid by the tweet at Workman. No, I don't know. I don't know yet. I'm not there yet, so I don't know. But I know a couple of the people doing the online marketing there, and they're terrifically innovative. And I think my experience at HarperStudio, and I imagine it will be the same at Workman, but I don't know yet, is it is so different author to author. I mean, some authors are just so allergic that they shouldn't be doing the kind of social media that makes them uncomfortable, because the audience will know. For those people, you need to find other ways to get material out, free samples of audio clips or samples of their books, or things that don't mean that they're out there waving their hands around uncomfortably. But then there are other authors who take to it like a duck to water. I mean, at HarperStudio, we were hiring a couple people to work as coaches with our authors, and we would bring in authors 15 or 20 at a time to do seminars for them about social media. Just like, here's the best practices, here's easy things you can do. We'll go to your house and set you up and show you how to blog. We'll show you how to become a participant in your community. And it's not really different from the things you've been doing before, and here's a way to reach more people more quickly. But it's an education process, and some authors are much more comfortable with it than others. So I don't know yet how that works with individual authors at Workman, but I'll soon find out. Enhanced eBooks, that is the brave new world, and I wish I had a good answer. It's really exciting. I've seen some experiments that I think are super cool. I don't know if it's the next CD-ROM or the next big thing. I really don't. I think that the good news with multimedia and digital publishing is that it costs relatively little to experiment, and you can find out very quickly if the experiment is working or not. So that's the fun part of this. Instead of the $1 million campaign that, gee, I guess that didn't work, it's let's try this. Let's spend $10,000 to do this cool app, or this video that might or might not be viral, or this translation of this book. We did at HarperStudio one of the first books with Crush It, and I thought that was they did a terrific job, that company, doing a video version of the book with text, and Gary's fans bought it. People who had already bought the book also bought the book, which was interesting. But I think we've really just scratched the surface. So I'm excited to get an iPad and play with it, and I'm excited to take a look at the Workman titles, as I was just saying, the ones that aren't text only. I mean, the hope is that what we've been doing so far is really just putting radio on television, and we haven't really used the format. But how we're going to use the format, I'm sure it will depend on what the book is and what the technology is, but how we're going to use it to really do something that somebody wants, as opposed to just something to announce that sounds cool, that remains to be seen. So I think we'll find that out together. Well, I think I was responding to a report that people were very upset about that showed that there were an average of 2,000 or so copies being pirated off of the average new trade book that was available digitally. And people were saying, oh, this is terrible. And certainly, if we saw our business being pirated completely and Napsterized into oblivion, it would be terrible. And copyright, I've spent a lot of time, fighting for copyright. However, 2,000 copies, I thought, we give away 2,000 copies at Book Expo, and we're upset if we can't give them all away. We're like, oh, darn, we have so many bad galleys left over. They cost us $10 a piece. And we're like, darn, we couldn't give them all away. So I think 2,000 copies for pirated is good news. That shows maybe those people will read it, tell their friends, go buy the author's next book, get that author discussed out in the world. I think that is such a drop in the bucket and possibly a good thing in terms of marketing seeding. That those statistics just made me stop for a minute and say, is that really bad? I'm not sure that that's bad at that level. That might actually be a positive. So I'm sure there are those who will disagree, but at that level, it made me pause. Well, I was hoping I would convince even more authors to come on board because of this wonderful profit share. And the profit share being offered there was pretty wonderful if you look at the math, because we weren't charging authors overhead in the calculation, which most profit shares that publishers do have some cost of sales or some overhead number. So it's a pretty aggressive model. And in success, an author is 40 to 60% ahead on an average, if you're spending average marketing costs and production costs. But the problem of the bird in hand was really a compelling difference. And an author with a track record, what you learn as you start digging into individual deals and approaching various authors is they're already making a lot more than 50% of the profit. They're making sometimes 80, 90, 105% of the profit out of that total pie that the author and publisher have to share. So it's like, gee, I'm going to give up my advance to get 50% when I'm now getting, so that became more difficult, and I could see that going in early on. So the challenge became, what can I create, what can I concoct, what can I convince someone of, with that as the barrier? And we have a lot of great authors signed up at that company, and the company is doing well. But the level of author that might have been interested if they really, given the math, they're so far ahead because of the unearned advance that they're actually effectively getting a much higher percentage than 50% already. So that was frustrating. And the returnable thing was, I was frustrated not being able to have that work the way I was hoping it would. It will take publishing imprints with much larger authors and more clout than we had at HarperStudio to really make that stick. And I'd still like to see either some hybrid model created between booksellers and publishers that share risk in a different way, but we haven't figured that out. How far away is print on demand? It's interesting, there are a number of booksellers with espresso machines in their stores in the United States, and some of them are making money, but it does require more staff time than I think that any of them realized, because a lot of the people who are coming in wanting to use print on demand, it's not that they're ordering a book that's just sitting there digitally to download that just happens to not be in print that day, which is our vision of what it should become someday. These people are coming in to self-publish their memoirs or their family histories or their family cookbooks, and they need a lot of help. So you need staff to kind of help them do that self-publishing, and I think that's been difficult. I mean, iUniverse published 24,000 authors last year. So the number of people who want to self-publish, that's a great business, but it's hard for booksellers to handle. On the other hand, I do think that in the next 5 or 10 years we'll have kiosks, as Jason Epstein has envisioned, within bookstores, beyond bookstores, that will be making a lot of titles available. They will be somewhat higher cost titles than what we're able to get digitally, though. So, you're willing to pay more to get a physical book,
but where you could probably get less electronically. But I think we will see a lot more in the next 5 or 10 years.
Buy electronically already insist on lower prices.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Well, I haven't been able to answer all these questions very well, but I will keep trying to find out the answers, and I'll come back sometime and tell you what I find out. So thank you.